Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using code FOREVER. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Hey, everybody. It is the Seahawks Syndicate coming to you a little earlier than normal based on popular demand. We are going twice a month now. This will be a bi-weekly show through the rest of the season. I'm Dan from Seahawks Forever. That's Bryce from the Seahawks Eye. That's Brandon Kane from the Hawks Nest and Mookie Alexander from Field Goals. We have a lot to talk about tonight, gentlemen, and I want to start off kind of with an overarching view. Seahawks coming out of the bye week took care of business like we talked about on the last show. They're getting to week 11, the Rams matchup at 7-2, one of 3 teams left in the NFC that have 7 wins. They are set up for everything they need to accomplish the rest of the year. A couple impressive wins back to back. I just want to get your general takes on where you feel like this team is right now at 7-2 heading into the Rams game. Bryce, let's start with you.
Well, for me, with this team going in at 7-2 into this Rams game, like this is probably the most complete Seahawks team I think we've seen in a very long time, where you can look at them and go, yeah, there's little nicks and things you want to really pick at, but overall, the special teams is good. The defense, even not fully healthy, is good. This offense, yes, we want to all pick on the run game and be like, it's not where we'd ideally like it to be, but it's coming along, and it started to show signs of life last week against Arizona. So for me, going into this, the level of optimism is very high. Even if this game doesn't turn out the way Seahawks fans want it to, I don't look at it and go, you know what? If they say lose this game to the Rams, well, that's it. The season's over. Like, you know, they're never going to be able to win the NFC West. If they lose this game, it's going to be something that this team has done throughout the season, which is every time they seem to lose, they seem to learn something and get better from it. And that's the biggest thing I think is a positive for this group. And where I think Mike Macdonald has kind of made some of his biggest strides this year as a coach and with this staff and team is they don't let the same things necessarily beat them week in and week out, where we have seen that in the past with some of the Pete Carroll teams where, hey, tight ends are killing us. They're running right down the seam, and it would be the same story week in and week out. Now it seems to be more of a situation when they have something that becomes a problem, they fix it, and then they accelerate off of that. And so I'm really excited to see this matchup, and I think, honestly, this Seahawks team, 13-4, is a real conversation piece for a final season record now for them.
13-4 Island. Mookie, how you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling physically a little bit under the weather, but it's that time of year. But in terms of how I feel about
hold on, guys.
Yeah.
I just realized for some reason we're not live.
Yeah, we're unscheduled.
I have no idea what happened. All right, well, let's just cue it up and do it again. Good thing we realize that now instead of a half an hour into it. Let's go back here. Let's go here. All right, we'll see you guys in a minute.
Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using code FOREVER. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Welcome back to the Seahawks Syndicate Week 11 version. And if you wondered, well, I just watched you guys a couple of weeks ago. Well, here we are again because of popular demand, because you demanded it. We're going bi-weekly through the rest of the year. So 2 shows a month. I'm Dan. I'm from Seahawks Forever. That's Bryce Coots from the Seahawks Eye. Mookie Alexander, managing editor of Field Goals, and Brandon Kane from the Hawks Nest, joining you once again. And sorry for being a little bit late. You know what? Sometimes shit happens when you go live and just technical difficulties get in the way. And sometimes it's operator error. I'll just take that one on the chin. Let's start here, you guys. We're gonna work through this, and we're gonna kind of wrap it all up, obviously, with what now shapes up to be one of the biggest regular season meetings that we can recall in recent history, with the Seahawks going up against the Rams, both at 7-2. Only 3 teams left now in the NFC at 7-2. We talked last time about how important it would be to get to that game at 7-2, to take care of business coming out of the bye. Boy, did they do that. Wiped the floor with the Commanders on Sunday Night Football. Did the same with the Cardinals at home, kind of turning things around at home a little bit. Let's go around and just give me your 360-degree view of how you feel about this team right now as they head into the Rams game. Bryce, let's start with you.
Well, for me with this team, I've got a level of optimism I haven't had in years with this Seahawks team, in the sense that this team seems to be one of the more complete versions that we've seen in recent memory, where we're talking about a team that our special team unit's really good. Our defense is one of the best in the NFL, and our offense, with some issues still, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is still producing as one of the better units in the NFL. So you're seeing a team where when all facets are going, and we kind of got to see that in the Washington game and even in the Cardinals game this past weekend, they are one of the better teams in the NFL, not just the NFC, in the NFL. And so, again, we can always find faults in any sort of thing that we're looking at. But when I look at this team right now and this matchup coming up against the Rams this week, this might be the best I have felt going into a divisional matchup since probably 2013, 2014 kind of era of the Seahawks, where it was like, yeah, this game's going to be tough, but I feel like we have a team that can potentially come in, win, steal a game, and play as the better team throughout, and not just kind of luck our way through into winning like we had at later parts in that era of the Seahawks. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic, Dan. How about you guys?
Mookie, you're up next. How you feeling?
I'm feeling all right. Were we live the first time? I mean, the chat's been really crazy. I don't know if we're live or we're not. Do any of you 3 even exist? Does the Seahawks?
All I know is
reality. We're living in a
we weren't
simulation.
actually mobsters, secret mobsters from the 1970s. What I do know is that the Seahawks are a heck of a football team. So I was willing to give it time after the first few weeks, even though they were playing well. I'm thinking, all right, they might be a good team, but I need to see a little bit more to believe that they are a potentially great team. And while they don't have a signature win yet per se, that could happen as soon as this weekend, I suppose. They look like a team that can make some noise in the playoffs. And I say that because of the way they are destroying inferior opposition. What has been one of the complaints we've had for the Pete Carroll teams over the past few seasons, and even a bit of the McDonald year last year? They've got this inferior team on the schedule, and it's like pulling teeth. They make the games extraordinarily difficult, such that the fourth quarter seemingly is always a case of the game is up in the balance. We've had a 31-7 first half, a 38-7 first half, and what was the Saints one, like 38-6? So that's 3 huge blowouts. The game is over by halftime in 3 games already. Haven't been able to say that for a long time.
No.
I'd say the 2015 team was probably the last time we saw the Seahawks just absolutely whoop on people. But that was in the second half of the year, more or less, where they beat 38-7 over the Vikings, something like that, and they beat the Ravens 35-6. They beat Cleveland 30-13. They beat Arizona something like 36-6 in the final game of the season. That's when they were really in a groove. That was kind of the last bits of the Legion of Boom. I think one of my favorite stats through these post-bye week games, 0. Number of punts in the first half with this offense. They've got the 1 turnover, which is the botched fumble between Olu and Darnold. But other than that, it has been a score, 1 fumble, 1 kneel down. That's it. So the Seahawks offense is jumping on people quickly. And even though the defense got their points on 2 touchdowns last week against Arizona, I am still convinced the offense needs to click in order for them to be real contenders. And they are just dialing it up. They're not waiting until the fourth quarter to win games. The offense is making sure that they pounce quickly, and it is in stark contrast to the 0 opening drive touchdowns we saw last season under Ryan Grubb. And I think most of the last Shane Waldron year was kind of the same thing. So, yes, this Seahawks team is so balanced, and it is balanced in a way that is different. I wouldn't say different, but it is similar to the Legion of Boom years. It's just that I think this offense, if the running game gets going, could be even higher power than any of the Legion of Boom offenses. So you think about what this passing game has done, such that Sam Darnold has more touchdowns and incompletions over the last 2 weeks it's already amazing. So again, just get that run game going, and you've got something cooking. And also the defensive side of the ball, for them to still be playing this well. I don't know, they're not playing a gauntlet of offenses these last few weeks, but how many times, even in the Pete years, Earl Thomas goes out, we got to deal with Steven Terrell for a game, and he completely destroys the function of the defense. Or you have, a linebacker going, you got to play Brock Coyle for a game, and suddenly they don't know how to defend a read option. Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I dread to think of some of the backups we've had over the years. These backups, though, the depth is still showing up. It's like they're playing like they've been starters all season. So I am just so impressed with how this team looks and also how well they're coached, and as a testament to McDonald and his coaching staff.
Good argument that Michael Dixon's the highest paid player or the most overpaid player in the league this year. Just has not really been needed since they made him the highest paid punter in the league. Brandon, how you feeling?
Yeah, I think that the two guys before me have a lot of where I'm at with the outlook of this team. I think in general terms, watching this team this year, you knew that we were on the right path to becoming a contender. Was it going to happen this year? Is it going to still take us to 26, 27? And I think that we're getting closer and closer to believing that this is a team this year that can be that contending team. I think as Mookie talked about with the signature win aspect of it, you have had an easier schedule. That's the reality of it. Now you play the schedule you're given, but you have had an easier schedule this year. We knew coming into it, that'd be the case. You took care of business. The points about getting up on these teams early and being so different from the Carroll era. I always kind of felt like Carroll era had his offenses running very conservatively through first halves, when it wasn't the 2-minute drills, wasn't one of the end of game situations, especially when it came to targeting the middle of the field. And part of the reason that you're seeing what we're doing here is the benefits of utilization of your offense for 4 quarters and trying to attack all 4 quarters rather than just try to wait to a standpoint of the game. You don't have to make it that hard on yourself. And that's part of why they've gotten out to these comfortable wins. But I do still believe that until I'm fully ready to get to a spot of saying, I know this team's ready to contend with the best, I think they're ready, but I'm talking about I got to see him beat one of these teams. That's been one of the things that has been missing over the past couple of years, even with a team that's won more games than it's lost. You've been able to beat up on average, middle-of-the-road teams, even slightly better than average middle-of-the-road teams. But anytime you've had to face a team that's actually what I call the upper crust out there, you've kind of you've not been able to stand with them, and you've lost those games. Some have been closer than others, and that's going to be where down the home stretch now, I think we have 5 of the 8 teams have a 500 record or better, and then end of the schedule, including 2 against the Rams. I think that's what I'm going to be looking to kind of learn about from this team, but they have all the potentiality of the world. The upside of this team is as high as any Seattle Seahawks team that we have ever seen, including the Legion of Boom teams. But I don't know that they're quite yet there. The exciting part is it does feel like they've been building every week to getting closer and closer to that mark.
It's pretty incredible how quickly our expectations change. I mean, if you had asked any of us at the beginning of the year if we'd taken 7-2, sure we would. And here we are. And it's a 7-2 that has mostly been dominant for the last month plus, and yet we're going to spend some time tonight nitpicking some things, right? I mean, that's just kind of where the expectations change. This is how things currently look, and we're seeing a lot of this around the league now, right? These power rankings, and we've seen the Seahawks even higher than this. NFL.com has had them number 1 for most of the last couple of weeks. This is from Pro Football Talk. And this is one of the more conservative rankings when it comes to the Seahawks that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, which just means it's more fun to talk about. The Seahawks at 6 behind the Eagles, who won kind of a slugfest last night against the Green Bay Packers. A lot more sluggish game than we would have expected from those 2 teams. The Lions, the Broncos, who have 8 wins, but we can talk about that. And then the Colts, and they have the Rams at number 1. Now, we're going to get deeper into the actual matchup with the Rams a little bit later. Just kind of want to generally get your thoughts on these rankings. Mookie, let's start with you, and I want to combo it with another question because you're kind of our historian on the panel here with that big, giant brain of yours. When was the last time that you can I want your thoughts on this power ranking, and then I also want you to recount when is the last time you can remember them at this juncture of the season, more than halfway in, facing a game this important in the regular season?
Yeah, I look at these power rankings. I don't really have a big issue with the Rams being at number 1 because similarly to Seattle, not only are they winning, they're winning impressively. And one of their 2 losses, they blew a 26-7 lead against Philadelphia. And if they had NFL-level kicking, they probably would have won that game because they had 2 kicks blocked. And then they had, what was their other loss? The 49ers game. Another weird, funky sort of game. They fumble near the goal line. They have a missed extra point. So, I mean, that really was a game that they should have won. So, of course, they should have lost the Colts game if A.D. Mitchell wasn't just blatantly hurting his own team. But now he's off with the New York Jets. I think that the Colts being that high up there, I might move him down a peg, but you know what? Jonathan Taylor is playing out of his mind. Lou Anarumo is proving that he was scapegoated by Cincinnati because that Colts defense is at least respectable without being overly talented. Daniel Jones is starting to come back down to earth a bit with all of his turnovers, and the offensive line is getting leaky in terms of the sacks allowed. But the Colts, I think we're going to find out more about them in the second half of this. Well, it is the second half of the season, but after their bye. I mean, they got Kansas City, they got Houston twice. I think they've already played Tennessee twice. Jacksonville is still respectable despite that awful collapse the other day. So things are about to ratchet up for Indianapolis. And of course, Indianapolis is at Seattle week 15, and that could be another big game for both squads. Denver, I think their defense is the best in the league, like even better than Seattle's because of that pass rush. I mean, Seattle's pass rush is great by committee. There's not a single person on Seattle's defensive line who's as good as Benito. I mean, Nick Benito is amazing, and Zach Allen is one of the more underrated guys in the league. I think that the Broncos, when Surtain is healthy, if they got a great secondary, they've got it. They've got everything at all three levels. Maybe linebackers are weak spot, but Denver's defense is doing a lot of carrying for an offense that cannot score consistently. The Seahawks, to me, should be above Denver because of how balanced they are. In fact, I would drop Denver below Detroit as well. Philadelphia, I think, would put them above. Well, it's tough. I think that the Eagles are still fine as a top five-ish team, but I wouldn't put Denver above, or rather below Philadelphia because they did beat them. We're obviously off the screen for a little bit. There we go. That makes sense.
No idea what's going on here, guys.
Yeah. Well, whatever the case there. As far as the magnitude of this game, I'd say this is the biggest regular season game for the Seahawks in terms of the top of the conference standings since 2019, week 17 against the San Francisco 49ers. That was a Sunday night game. That was game 256 at the time. And if San Francisco won, they'd have been the one seed. If Seattle won, I don't think they would have been the one seed, but they would have won the division. And they lost by a yard. That was the last, I think, truly big-time game that the Seahawks had, with, thinking about the very top. But, I could even go a little bit nearer to that. 2020, week 16 against the Rams. Empty stadium, COVID year. The best performance they have ever put up against the Sean McVay offense. 20-9 win. They hold them out of the end zone. Jamal Adams makes this huge stop on 4th and goal. I mean, it's one of Adams' best games ever. Russ throws that clinching touchdown pass to Jacob Hollister. Now, unfortunately, we hit a little monkey's paw situation because 2 weeks later, the Rams got their lick back, so to speak. But yeah, to me, this is one of the biggest games, not just regular season-wise. This is one of their biggest games since Super Bowl 49. In terms of what it means to this franchise and whether they can get the fan base to believe. Because if they win this game, they've got the inside track to the number one seed to me. And if they lose this game, it's not the end of the world. But if they win this game, it's like, wow, we've finally conquered the McVay Rams with their starting quarterback, with Matthew Stafford healthy. If they do that, then they've proven to everybody this is a team that can beat and hang with anybody in the league. And I don't know if they'll win this weekend, but I have every reason to believe they can at least hang with them. And that's what makes this team so exciting, is that they're playing at a level where they don't look like they're just going to get run over by the other top teams in the league. If you were to match them up right now with Detroit or Philadelphia, or on the AFC side, Indianapolis, Denver, New England, do you think that the Seahawks would be heavy underdogs or expected to lose in a lopsided fashion against any of them? I do not think so. I think they're capable of beating any team in the league right now.
Now, last I checked, they're 2.5-point underdogs this weekend, it looks like, which essentially means a push. Usually they give about 3 points to the home team. Let's do this. Brandon, I want to ask you specifically, let's talk about this defense the last couple of weeks coming out of the bye. A lot of injuries. We've been missing some key players, right? We didn't have Ernest Jones on Sunday. The week before, we were missing some key pieces. Jaron Reed Jaron Reed on injured reserve. Julian Love on injured reserve. Josh Jobe didn't play this last week because of concussion. And yet this defense continues to play at not just a high level, but it feels like they get better and better every week, tighter and tighter every week. Try to sum that up for me, put that into words. Like, what does that say to you about this team's ability to contend?
Well, I think that Mike definitely had something shaken free in the Tampa Bay game. I think that kind of broke through from the simplistic nature of some of what you were rolling to how much more complicated you've gotten defensively, how much more willing you are to blitz and run the stack boxes, and let Mike get into where he's in his comfort zone, in my opinion, Dan. And that the more he's gotten in his comfort zone, the better this defense is played. Now, to your point, yeah, you've got reinforcement from a depth standpoint that you haven't had in prior years. We've been struggling just to find the frontline starters. To have a guy like Drake Thomas develop as he's developed, to have Ty Cotta playing like a top, basically 7 safety, free safety in the sport almost, at least by how he's rated, that speaks to you of developing the depth, and it's developing with these guys, not necessarily landing on these guys as picks. You brought Drake in from the Raiders. You brought Ty Cotta in as an undrafted rookie guy, and you've developed these guys through part of something we don't talk about with Mike a lot. We get into the schematics, we get into the defense, we get into his mastermind status. We don't often speak about how he develops players. And he seems to be pretty good at that. Look at how fast Nick Immanwari has been able to really rise up and slide in and be able to play really well. So they have gotten better as the years got along. Part of it, I think, has been that Mike has finally kind of remembered himself a little bit and what he does best. And that, if you're gonna go down, don't go down in flames doing what you don't do, which in my opinion is what they did in that Tampa Bay game. Go down in flames by doing what you do. But if you do what you do, Mike's defense, I think that's where you see the dominance start to rise out of this defense. And that's why they've been able to maintain this. You've gotten a little bit healthier. That has helped out too as well. And guys that you have lost, you've had the replacement for Julian. Jaron Reed's lost. You've got a little bit of depth on the defensive line and defensive tackle to deal with that. And he was a rotational guy at that point. But you've developed the guys well. You've got Mike running his defense fully tilted. And young guys are rising up. We're getting, difference makers here and there starting to pop a little bit. Say nothing if I think we might see with a guy like Devin Witherspoon finding his home on the outside corner position the past couple of weeks. He's been very good over there, and I thought that that's where he'd be at his best. It's a lot of variety of things coming together here, from young players developing to backups finding a role now to filling in and not missing a beat, to Mike going full on, unadulterated Mike McDonald defense. I put the combination of all that together, and that's why it continually looks like it's improving week by week.
We hear the word complementary. We've heard the word alignment a lot in the last 6 to 8 months. I remember the first time I got a chance to speak with John Schneider after he hired Mike McDonald. The thing that he raved about the most, and his eyes just lit up when he was talking about it, is he kept using the word teacher and talking about teaching the teachers and watching the teachers and observing the teachers. And it's, of course, we give all the credit to Mike McDonald, but it's that staff. You have to give credit across the board to that, because that really was one of the things that, and I try not to spend too much time kind of shoveling dirt on the ex-coach, because, I think we all agree that the last couple of years didn't look good while he was here. But I think one of my biggest pet peeves is we didn't see players get better. We didn't see those players develop. We didn't see those mid-round, late-round picks that we all liked on draft day. We liked the upside. We didn't see them become what we thought they could become. We didn't see those traits that we loved through the draft process translate to the NFL. Now we're seeing that. And as you point out, Brandon, like from every different aspect, we have first round picks, we have high priced free agents, we have trade targets, we have UDFAs over there, and they're all stepping up and playing well. Meanwhile, on the offensive side of the ball, which was where all the biggest question marks were this offseason, and the reason that a lot of analysts were slow and resistant to accept the Seahawks and embrace them and pick them as a true contender, because there were so many changes over there, they're playing lights out. And Bryce, that's why I want to go to you next. You're the offensive guy, and we'll start there. We're going to spend some time talking about that side of the ball. I still have, and I think there's probably a lot of people that are watching tonight, a lot of people in the fan base still have a little bit of PTSD, because even the offensive side of the ball, well, both sides of the ball, it's been a roller coaster the last 10 years. There have been great years, and then there have been really rocky years. And for the most part, though, it's just they've never given us what we thought they could and what we wanted them to. Didn't get off to early starts, weren't consistent enough in both aspects, running and throwing the football. Offensive line play obviously was an issue. Of course, we'll talk about that throughout. But what's the thing that, we're 9 games into this now, and there's still a little part of me when I sit down with the remote control to start each game, I'm like, okay, is this the game that it kind of all comes crashing back to earth? That's starting to subside. Like, this is a legitimate offense that feels like they can go out every single week, no matter who they're facing, and find a way to beat you. What's the most impressive thing with your coaching background, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach? What's the most impressive thing, and the thing that tells you after 9 games that we can trust this offense?
There's a couple things, and I'll kind of go back to when you look first off at what they did this offseason, who they hired, who they brought in. This is the first time since really Brian Schottenheimer and Mike Solari, we had a veteran offensive coaching staff, because Shane Waldron, first time OC when he came into Seattle, Ryan Grubb, first-time OC, and some of the guys they brought in and put in spots hadn't necessarily done those roles before. But when you look at what Kubiak, John Benton, the guys that they even kept over from Ryan Grubb's staff and Palomalu and Jake Peets, they've really cultivated a very experienced NFL playing or NFL coaching staff that understands the way they want to play football on offense. The thing for me, though, I think, to your point, Dan, and what you asked about being week 9, week 10 now, and finally trusting this offense is two things Clint Kubiak has shown. He has shown an ability to script really good plays initially at the beginning. Like, look at our opening drives now in Seattle, or first couple drives. We have the expectancy that, hey, we might go down the field and score not a field goal. Like, we might get touchdowns out of this, which is something we haven't been able to say for a very long time. And for a lot of Pete's era, we couldn't really say. It was like, okay, we're going to start scoring near the end of the first quarter. Maybe the second quarter, we'll start getting some touchdowns out of it. The other thing, though, that I think Clint Kubiak has done very well is he doesn't abandon things. He just attacks you in a different way with what he wants to do. And so what I mean by that is you look at the run game. We've had a team that has struggled to get more than, we've had more run stops or 0 or negative yards than any team in the NFL. Has that deterred him from running the ball? No. He's starting to find different ways to do it. He's got a counterpunch to your initial scheme that you're bringing out. And the thing now with Rashid Shaheed being here is you saw a little bit that with the Cardinals game. Hey, we're going to run a direct toss to Shaheed as him as a running back. We're going to run a jet. We're going to do some of these different things now because, yeah, you guys are going to maybe lighten your box. You might do this. He's got an idea because he's got a book to pull from where he can sit back and go, hey, when I did this back here, or when I was on a staff and we did this, and this was what the other team did, here's the counterpunch that we used. And he has data to pull from. And he has the ability to, have things go sideways a little bit in some of the games, like the Jalen Milroe package hasn't worked. What have they done? Completely stopped doing it. And that's a thing an offensive coordinator sometimes. He may really want to do those Jalen Milroe package plays. Like Kubiak might be thinking like, man, this is such a creative way for me to get this awesome player, an athletic freak involved, but I can't do that because it throws off the rest of our offense. You look at what he's done with Sam Darnold and how he's elevated Sam. Like, we all sat here, and I think a lot of the national media and a lot of people went, there's no way Sam's going to replicate Minnesota. Sam's playing more efficiently than he did in Minnesota, which is something I don't think a lot of people were expecting. A lot of us were thinking, okay, me included, hey, we'll get an in-between of what Sam did in Minnesota at the high and, a better floor to it. Sam's playing at a very high rate, and the way that they've been able to create that marriage between what Kubiak likes to do, what Sam's good at, how to get this offensive line and this run game all kind of cohesively working, you're starting to see it take shape. And again, we all kind of sat here and said, hey, the bye week for last year's defense was kind of the turning point for that unit to start really developing into what Mike McDonald wanted to be, jettisoned some players, added a couple, added Ernest Jones to that group. What did they do this year? Hey, we're going to go get the receiver that we need to kind of really help this offense that we didn't get in the offseason at the bye week or just after. And now they've been able to, you look at the Cardinals game and what they did. Now, again, to the point, Brandon talked about it on his show today when he did his preview, that the second half kind of sucked because we just geared down into, hey, we're going to run the ball like crazy. But like we've all kind of pointed out, Arizona knew we were going to run the ball in the second half, and we still turned out 125 yards. That's something we haven't been able to do really since the Marshawn days where, hey, teams knew we were going to run the football. Now go and stop us from doing it.
Let's talk about that a little bit, and we'll transition into another part of the conversation because there's a lot of layers to what we saw in the second half against the Cardinals. Mookie, we saw them run the football consistently. Big runs, big holes, gashing the Cardinals at a time when obviously the Cardinals knew we were going to run the football. It's what Mike McDonald talked about coming on the sideline interview, coming out of the locker room. It's something he's talked about since the offseason. Like there are those moments, those 4-minute offense. We need to burn the clock. We need to run the football effectively enough even when they're expecting it. They did more than that. They gashed them. Now there was a personnel switch there, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about what happened at center. But do you trust what you saw in the second half, that maybe this running game is coming together, or were there some circumstantial aspects to that?
Well, I think about the first game against Arizona, and as much as the pass pro might have struggled, they were getting some good running plays against the Cardinals. I think their previous season high in rushing might have happened against Arizona. But for this one to me, it's 200 yards, and they had to kneel down a few times, so it cost them the 200-yard mark, which was a disappointment because I wanted to see that 2 on the box score.
I think it was up to 202 for a minute there.
202. I would have just had Drew Lock sneak it a couple of times instead of what actually happened. But
how about Drew taking the beating on the PFF score too, because he's got to take the kneel down.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know how Drew's going to be able to recover from this. That's going to hurt his market value when he's a free agent in 2 years. But this running game, that was my favorite drive of the game actually. 13 plays, 79 yards, not a single passing play, and the game was pretty much in hand, but they could have easily, if they wanted to, call a couple of passes just to keep the sticks moving so they don't quickly go 3 and out and give the ball back to Arizona because Arizona's finally moving the ball down the field. No, they ran it down Arizona's throats. And this was off of a turnover on outs. I think this was after the Pritchett breakup in the end zone on Marvin Harrison Jr. So that was kind of Arizona's last gasp. And they follow up with these amazing punishing run plays. I think of the Charbonnet run of the very first carry and watch the right side of the line with Bradford and Lucas. They're clearing out their guys, and Gray Zabel takes his guy. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Darius Robinson. He took him to town. I mean, he almost drove him out of the stadium. And Charbonnet was able to cut back, get space, break a tackle, and pick up, 30 yards? So it was, to me, kind of like a statement of intent from Mike McDonald more than anything else. Like, hey, if we want to close this game out, we got to also be able to do this because they didn't get a touchdown. They didn't need a touchdown. They were up by a bunch, but they took 7 minutes off the clock just running the ball. That's what, like Philadelphia last year when they had their offensive line as healthiest, they were able to do that. I remember, I think it was the Pittsburgh game where they ran out, I think, the final 11 minutes of game time against Pittsburgh, and they barely threw the ball. Like, that's how dominant their offensive line was. Now, is Seattle's offensive line that good? No, not yet, but just to even see them do it was great, especially in the context of how they kind of bungled the Houston game, where they couldn't run it consistently against Houston. They were throwing it and turning it over, and it kind of let Houston sort of back into the game.
Having receivers throw it, just, all that.
Yeah. In this circumstance, they just squeezed the life out of Arizona, one run play at a time. And yes, it is hard to ignore the fact that they had no explosive plays in the first half on the ground. All of their explosive rushes came in the second half. And I think that the offensive line just looked different. It looked a little bit better in terms of run blocking when Olu was in the game. But we know nothing of the pass blocking because Darnold threw 2 passes in the second half.
Yeah.
So we know absolutely nothing about what's going to happen in the long run with Oluwatimi in that lineup and from a pass pro standpoint. But I think in the run game, that was a bit eye-opening in the way that he was able to consistently get to his guy, climb to the second level, because that's been kind of a criticism of him that he's not fast enough to get there. Now, can this hold up over the next several weeks, especially against tougher defenses like the Rams? Remains to be seen. But against weaker opposition like Tennessee, I believe that this run game is going to start to take off. I don't expect 200 yards every week, but I expect them to be at least climbing from mediocre to average, if not a little bit above average. They just have too much running back talent, and I think they have enough talent in the offensive line to get things working.
Brandon, let's talk about that personnel change. Obviously, about midway through the second quarter, Jalen Sundell goes down with a knee injury. Didn't look that serious at the time. They didn't take him back to the locker room. He stayed on the sideline with an ice pack on his knee. Sounds like injury reserve is a possibility. He's going to miss several weeks with a knee sprain at minimum. Oluwatimi comes in. And if there was any position along the offensive line where maybe we had some quality depth, we've seen what Oluwatimi can do. I've always said, since he was drafted, I thought this is a guy that could start for 8-10 years in the league and never make a Pro Bowl. There's tremendous value in that. We've talked on this show about the upside of Jalen Sundell and his athleticism. But if there's a weakness in Sundell's game, it's maybe a lack of anchor. And we haven't seen it cost us a game. We haven't seen it really get him blown up over the entire course of a game, but it's 4 or 5 plays throughout the course of a game, here and there. Oluwatimi seems to be a more physical guy, a more stout guy. That was the word that John Schneider used the night that they drafted him. He's much more stout. There was a clear uptick, as we've talked about, in the running game in the second half. Is that a coincidence, or did you see some things from Oluwatimi in that game that gave you some hope that maybe he can be that catalyst, as Mike McDonald called him yesterday, in this run game, maybe getting it going finally?
I do think he was a little more stout. I think I'm probably a little bit reticent from the cohorts here on this in believing that this is a turn the corner situation. I think that the commitment from the Seattle Seahawks, offensively speaking, is going to help them throughout the course of this season and what the rest of the season is going to bring about as far as to find some functionality, let's call it, in the run game. I'm not saying that we're not going to be decent there. I do maintain and come back to the issues, come back to this from a problematic standpoint. If you just deal with so many stack boxes, you're still number 2 in the NFL in stack box rate, top 5 in blitz rate. I don't think a lot of offenses are going to find consistent running game success dealing with those 2 parameters. I also think in looking back at the film, Olu was certainly a help, and he's a better run blocker at the point of attack, to your point, more stout, Dan, than what you get from Sundell with the athleticism, and that did help, and that took the running game a little bit more forward. It did seem to me, though, rewatching the tape, that this was as much an over pursuit issue by the Cardinals. They were bringing these stack boxes still into play in that second half, and their defense was trying so hard to get the stop, get back the offense, is that they were losing their gap integrity and overrunning the plays. And this is why when you look at a lot of those runs in that second half, they're on cutbacks going against the flow of the play back across it, where the running backs are reading the over pursuit and then attacking that over pursuit. So it's a bit of a both there for that to me on this one, where I don't think defenses by and large have consistently over pursued us offensively. They've stacked the box and then kept their gap integrity for the most part throughout the game. And that to me is a big part of why you're not able to run the ball. There's other supplemental things here, like a Gray Zabel struggles on all 22 tape at times at sustaining the block. He gets the hat on the hat, can't sustain the block. The guy slides off and the run play's blown up. It's stuff like that that also is peppered in here. But it's, to me, the baseline of, if you were to deal with the middle of the road amount of stack boxes, this run game would be effective. You're not dealing with that. You're not going to deal with that into the future.
Now, based on what you saw, and I thought he did an exceptional job for the most part, lost a couple of reps, but I thought he beat Dalvin Tomlinson. If you were just going head-to-head matchup, I thought he owned Dalvin Tomlinson for the most part. Very, very good run defender in the second half. And this Cardinals team came into the game 12th in the league against the run. This week, the Rams are a little different animal. They're built a little bit more on explosiveness and quickness up front, but there is a guy that they have playing nose tackle. He's a little undersized, but we've seen him before. His name's Poona Ford. Based on what you saw, just going back to you real quick, Brandon, to follow up on what you saw on tape, how do you like that matchup? Do you like Oluwatimi's chances in that matchup against Poona maybe a little bit more than Jalen?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, Poona's going to get you with leverage because he's so low to the ground. He just always gets up underneath your pads. And Olu's probably got a little bit, having that stoutness is going to work in your favor versus a guy that's not as good at doing that, who can get walked back a little bit in that. I think Poona, too, has done a little bit of the Jaron Reed kind of math that Jaron did, where Jaron went from being a nose tackle, transitioned to a 3-tech. And then once you made that transition to 3-tech, it's not just so easy to go right back in and slide inside to nose tackle like it's no thing. He's doing it. He's doing it decently. I don't know if he's as good at a nose tackle and stopping the run now as what he was when he first came in the door for us as a nose tackle, if that makes sense. Not that he's bad, but just I don't know if it's the same equivalency of play. He's become more of a bit of a pass rusher a little bit in what he brings to the table.
Now, Bryce, one of the things that all of us were most excited to see on Sunday is the shiny new toy and the new acquisition and Rashid Shaheed and what he might be able to do with that offense. And we talked a lot, I know, on all of our shows last week and on Field Goals about how the threat of Rashid Shaheed could, maybe even should, over the second half of the season, force some of these defenses to pull out of those stack boxes a little bit, maybe loosen things up a little bit in the run game. We didn't really get to see that on Sunday because because of the game script, Shaheed only touched the ball 3 times, and B, Torrey Horton didn't play. So we didn't get the dual threat, essentially Shaheed taking Torrey Horton's place and only played, I think, about 30% of the snaps. As a guy who game plans and calls plays, and is that it? When you're a week away from such a big game like they're about to face, is that a good thing? When the Rams go to watch tape this week, they don't really have anything to go on? Or would it have been better to feature him and have more opportunities to kind of play around with him, to put things on tape to make the Rams have to prepare?
I think the one thing you got to look at when you acquire a player like they did with Shaheed and, you bring him into your building is really all he's learning that week is the game plan. That's what he's learning. And so you're trying to sprinkle him in, but he's not getting fully accustomed to the playbook. And even though he knows what Kubiak did in New Orleans, terminology is still slightly different because he's got a new quarterback. He's got new guys in there in Cooper Kupp. He's got kind of some new staff on the passing side. So Kubiak's had to change some of that terminology he likes to use. Zulu may mean, the Z's got an out in Kubiak Saints office to Zulu now means that the Z's motioning and running an over route. And it's things like that change. So when you bring a guy in that's a weapon and you're trying to find ways to get him involved, I think that's why you saw them toss the ball to him as a running back. And you saw him take a jet and you saw the quick slot screen to him. Like, they're putting some things on tape, but for the Rams, again, they're going to go look at what Shaheed did well this year in New Orleans, what he's good at. And their DB coaches are going to say, hey, this is the routes that he's really comfortable with, because Seattle, again, Kubiak's going to put Shaheed in situations again this week where I don't know if we're going to see a massive uptick. You might see more plays with him for sure, but I don't think you'll see a massive uptick in snaps. Thank you. For him, because of the simple fact that he doesn't know the full playbook, and he's not going to know it in 2 weeks either. Like, even though he's an NFL player, there's a lot of kind of reprogramming you have to do as a player to figure out what everything means and everything does. And he's got to build trust with Sam. And I think you'll see some, maybe 15, 20 snaps for Shaheed on offense. But again, it may come in similar ways that we saw it, where how do we get the ball easily into his hands for him to make an impact, rather than, hey, how do we get him involved in those deep shots down the field in our deep passing concepts? Because part of it, when you look at what Seattle's done and what JSN has done so well, and even what Cooper Kupp did well in this Cardinals game, is understanding in their concept where to sit down in zones. And Shaheed still probably doesn't have that familiarity yet, because you look at Cooper Kupp's big catch was he knew exactly where he was and what they were playing. He kind of just drifted out and sat on the sidelines until Sam found him. That may be not something that Shaheed's completely comfortable with, and Sam's not comfortable with, with him yet. So again, I think that kind of plays into this. I think you'll see an uptick in snaps for Shaheed. I just don't know if they're going to be these dazzling plays that we want to see.
And guys, we see in the comments, we see the starred comments. Once we kind of get through the bulk of our conversation, we'll devote the last half of this show to all of that. So be patient with us. We'll get to you here in a moment. Mookie, not everything is perfect, right? Not everything is unicorns and rainbows. The Seahawks get a little loose with the football. And they tend to get a little loose with the football when things are going well for them in games and when they have big leads. It happened against Houston, certainly happened on Sunday against the Cardinals. Is that a concern going into a big game this week, or do you think that was kind of dictated by game script and maybe letting your foot off the gas a little bit?
I think the ball security issues have been a real problem under McDonald for the entirety of his brief coaching career. And we now have enough of a sample size to not just instinctively blame Geno Smith, because yes, he was a big part of the problem, but believe it or not, he didn't lose a fumble last season. He had all of his turnovers were interceptions, and the fumbles that team lost, a couple from DK, the ill-fated Pharaoh Brown screen that I think probably put any remaining doubters of Ryan Grubb over the edge and go, yeah, he can't be here anymore. And then, of course, the Laviska Shenault, D. Williams double trouble experience and all the turnovers and special teams there. So now Geno's gone. I think everybody who had a turnover last season is no longer on the roster. And now this year, they've just been consistently sloppy with the ball. It's unbelievable. They have lost more fumbles than any other team in the league. And the interceptions, as unlucky as they might be for the most part, Darnold is kind of middle of the pack in interceptions, but as a low volume quarterback, believe it or not, and this is not a criticism of Sam Darnold, so please, I already had enough, people yelling at me on Twitter. Sam Darnold's interception rate is the exact same as Geno's was last year. It's just that he's on much lower volume, and he's been 1,000 times more productive than Geno was really at any point of his 3 seasons as a starter. Sam's having an outstanding year, but the turnover problem is still there, and Sam himself has lost 4 fumbles. I mean, the Olu with Timmy exchange, it might have been on Olu, and it's understandable. New center in the game. He hasn't been able to work with Sam for a long time, but still, the turnover thing is real. It's not just Sam. It's also JSN lost a critical fumble opening day against San Francisco when they were ready to go in and possibly score again. You had Elijah Arroyo lose a fumble. Rashid Shaheed lost a fumble right after the bad exchange, I think, between Olu and Sam. And luckily, Brady Russell was Johnny on the spot to recover it and gain a couple more yards. But the ball security from this team has been unacceptable. And oddly enough, other than George Holani fumbling one deep into garbage time against New Orleans, Charbonnet and Walker are amazing in terms of not fumbling. Walker has fumbled, I think, one time. I think Charbonnet has never fumbled. So they're not the issue. But they can't be loosey-goosey with the football like this every week. And what is weird, they're way worse with this at home. On the road, they're actually taking care of the ball pretty well. Other than the Pittsburgh game, I think is the only time they've turned it over more than once away from Lumen Field. But at Lumen Field, they've turned it over 7 times in 2 weeks in games that they were comfortably leading. I think all of their turnovers were with double-digit leads. So I believe that has to get corrected. Yes, there is unluckiness. There's some random variance when it comes to fumble recoveries, but you can't put it on the ground every week like the Seahawks do and expect to get away with it against the better teams, or else you will get punished.
Yeah.
Arizona got 15 of their 22 points because of a weird interception that hit off of A.J. Barner's helmet and skied into the arms of Denzel Burke. And then there was the botched exchange inside their own 5. That's the other thing. Inside their own 20. So like last year, the problem is Geno had way too many red zone interceptions. The issue, so to speak, this year, they're having too many turnovers inside their own red zone, including a lost fumble in the end zone for a touchdown.
Inside their own 3 in particular.
Inside their own 3.
Yeah.
So, yes, so that really needs to be corrected because, I mean, Kansas City won a Super Bowl pretty recently 2 seasons ago with a negative turnover differential. But that's a rarity. That's not the norm. There are only a handful of teams in the history of the NFL that have ever won a title with a negative turnover differential. And at this moment, even though the Seahawks got a couple of turnovers last game, turned them into touchdowns, their turnover differential is -4. They're one of the most turnover-prone teams in the league. So they have to correct that because not every game is going to be, oh, we're up 20-something. So it's no big deal if you turn the ball over. A game like this one against the Rams, turnover could be the difference between a win and a loss. So I know that McDonald has to have some sort of Pete in him. It's all about the ball and has to be stressing ball security to everybody because this can't keep happening. So that's like the one blemish out of this game. I didn't ever think they were going to let Arizona back in it, even with the turnovers. But the one blemish out of that game is that the turnover problems are persisting and they just have to clean that up. I mean, it's not all luck. Some of it is just sloppiness.
Bryce, I want to go to you real quick with your OC eye on this because that interception that Darnold threw from his own end zone, it just looked almost deja vu-ish to the end of the Tampa Bay game and the Levante David interception there. Almost as deja vu-ish as Tyrese Knight knocking the ball out and DeMarcus Lawrence running it in for a touchdown. Other than the obvious of maybe getting Sam out on the move, both of those plays came from under center. And goodness, watching the game back again yesterday, if Barner holds his block there a little bit more on Baron Browning, just gives Sam an extra split second, like JSN was wide open at the 25. That was an easy pitch and catch. What else could they do in that exact situation when it comes up again? Would it be better if you want to throw the football from there? I'm fine with that. Would it be better to maybe go shotgun from there? How would you approach that?
There's a couple things playing into that. One, it's a tendency look too, right? So as a defensive coordinator, I have to look at, hey, what's the tendency of this team to call pass play wise? And so I may be telling my defensive line in certain situations, we know that they like under center, they like a quick drop, and they like Sam getting the ball out. And that ball comes out on a certain level of trajectory on those throws. We call it in quarterbacking a 2 or 1 ball, and that's a 2 ball. But the thing is, when you release that ball, you have to make sure it's clearing that front line. Well, if I'm a D lineman and I know I'm not getting to the quarterback, part of that is get my hands up or even get up instead of, pushing forward, stand up because it brings the blocker up. In that case, Barner's got to do a bit of a better job, and Sam might have to get deeper in his drop. That's the other part of this that, when you look at it is how deep was Sam's drop? Maybe on that play, when they watch film with Janoko goes, hey, Sam, that's a 5-step in a hitch, not a 3 in a hitch. I get you want to, and we talked about Sam getting this ball out so quick. It's great when it's a first read throw and he's able to have a clean window to make that throw. When it gets murky or mucky in there, you need to get depth. Depth helps you because it gets you away from that and you're able to throw that ball with a little bit more trajectory and level to it. And so to the point of shotgun, yeah, it can help. But the problem is when you're shotgunning in that area too is, and we've seen this before in the Texans game, your quarterback has no back out escape point. He can't get out of the back of the pocket because the end zone's there. So now you've hemorrhaged him in. And that's the problem where I don't like setting ourselves up to have to pass from those situations because you don't have a backdoor out. You can't roll your quarterback out. You can't do a lot of things with that pocket because of the fact you have the back end zone acting as a 12th defender. So in that situation, you basically are kind of hoping that Sam can get a clean pocket and get that ball out on time. If there's any sort of hitch, if there's any sort of, quick wanting to get it out, and that D-line knows or not, they're just going to create muck in front of him, and you get these deflections. Similar to what we had in that Texans game where he took the sack strip fumble in the end zone. That goes back to play calling. That goes back to a defense understanding what your tendency is in those situations. And again, this is something where Clint Kubiak has to look at the film and go, okay, I have to set us up better in our own, because like Mookie's point about the amount of turnovers we're having on our own end of basically our red zone, or as I call it, the black zone when I talk to my guys about it, because it's an area you don't really like to be in. You have to scheme to get out of there and flip field position. That's the goal there in that set. It's not to go and score. It's not to get big, massive, explosive plays. It's to sustain a drive to get out to about your 30 or 35 and safely be able to flip the field position. Not put yourself in situations where you're behind the chains and now you have to take a shot play to try and make up that space.
And sometimes the other team just makes a play because sometimes
that's football, brother.
Right?
I was going to ask you, Dan, and you guys on this, to your point, Dan. I think that these are kind of fluky, in my opinion, in some of these turnovers, because it's not one guy you go back to fumbling. Like the Rams got an issue with Kyron Williams and fumbling. There's an issue with him at times where he's going to fumble. We don't have that going on where it's different guys kind of all across the board. You have Sam going off a couple of guys' helmets. Why is that happening? Well, don't you guys think a little bit of part of this is too, as well, of the nature of the beast of the offense you're building? Last year, you had an offense with, for instance, with Geno Smith that was heavily predicated upon taking deep shots, 7-step drops, throwing it deep down the field. This offense is predicated upon the short passing attack. That's going to mean that you're going to throw fast. And then if those defensive linemen are smart enough to get their hands up or get in the passing lanes, you're going to get more tip balls in this offense versus a grub offense. More tip balls, more potential for interceptions, which is what we've seen. I come back to saying that's fluky / the price of doing business to run a West Coast offense, which is predicated upon the short passing attack. Do you guys see it that same way on this, or are you more of it's a bit of both?
I do, and sometimes I have to check myself and ask myself if I'm just trying to rationalize this, right? To make myself feel better about it. But these plays that we're talking about, with the exception of the Tampa Bay one, where the game was very much in the balance, they had a chance to go down and score on that last drive. So that one was huge. But most of these plays we're talking about, we've got big leads and we've got games in hand. And you have to wonder if sometimes, no matter how much you can tell guys on the sideline, you can say, hey, keep your foot on the gas, stay, don't lose the intensity. Like, let's not let up until the whistle blows. Like, there is a little bit of human nature there, right? And you just have to wonder. That's why I've had a bunch of people in the last couple of days say, hey, we can't turn it over like that. We're turning it over way too much. We can't beat the Rams like that. Well, I think when you're playing the Rams, there might just be that little bit of extra intensity where maybe you take care of those little details and prevent it from happening. Should we talk about that game a little bit?
Can I add one thing to this, Dan, before we go to it with Brandon's point there?
Yeah.
So, Brandon, I tend to agree with you that these are fluky. And then to your other point, it is part of doing business. And this is where, when you look at the West Coast offense and these rhythm passing games, and a lot of it, you end up with split field reads, which you are attacking a half of the field off your pre-snap as a quarterback because there's cues or whatever, and based on what you've seen where to go. When you start playing these more athletic D tackles, which we are seeing now in the NFL, they create more problems than the old school West Coast offenses had to necessarily deal with when they had the big Ted Washingtons in there and Hendersons on Green Bay, where these guys are pushing the pocket more. And now you take that 3-step rhythm and that guy's in your face. And so it's a bit of a fluke of it going off a helmet. Like, I don't know how many times I've ever seen that happen to a quarterback that many times in a season early on. But at the same point, I do agree. It's part of the price you pay doing business, living under center. Almost half of your offense is exclusively under center. Half of your passing offense is there. And when the other part of this is, how comfortable is your offensive line in certain areas? Where are they more comfortable when you're under center booting and moving that pocket, or are they more comfortable under center with the drop back game? And I think we've seen, if you go back and look at Sam, this is something I've been trying to dive into. He seems to get more pressure in his face right now and having to maneuver when we are doing under center drop backs than when we do shotgun, than when we do move things. And it's that price you're talking about to pay doing that, where teams figure out tendencies. And when you like to pass them under center on the drop back, they create different issues for you internally on that offensive line.
So here we go. Sunday, 1-2 in the NFC West, obviously, or 1A, 1B, 1-2 in DVOA. The top 2 graded quarterbacks in the league, according to PFF. The top 2 graded receivers in the NFC in Jackson Smith and Jigba Puka Nacua. You've got Sean McVay against the coach who was billed as the Sean McVay of defense when he was hired. So much on the line here. And this, frankly, is the team that has been the roadblock. Even when Pete was here, couldn't beat Sean McVay. Since he arrived in LA, they have been the thorn in our side. Mookie, I'm going to start with you on this one. Do you believe, as we sit here today, and again, this is a Tuesday. Unfortunately, we're not going to get an injury update today, so there's still some questions about some guys that are going to play. Do you feel like this team, as we sit here today, might be built right and built better to beat a Sean McVay team and a Matthew Stafford playing some of the best football of his career?
Well, I'd say that last year's defense did such a good job in the home game that Stafford played in, because the last game was with Jimmy G starting, so you kind of throw away a lot of that stuff in terms of competitiveness.
Right.
But they forced 7 3-and-outs against that Rams offense last year. And what lost in the game was Geno throwing interceptions and also just absurdly bad offensive line play that took away some of Geno's better plays and JSN's better plays. They couldn't get a yard on 4th and 1 and 3rd and 4th and 1 in overtime. Otherwise, they might have been able to win that game. Remember, the Rams scored 20 points in regulation and 7 came off that pick six, the ill-fated pick six, which I, at the time, declared the end of the Geno Smith era. And while that might have been an over-the-top reaction as a fan, I think I might have been partially right in terms of what happened with that play. But this Rams offense is different because they have that second receiver be Devontae Adams instead of Cooper Kupp. So while Cooper Kupp he's still got something left in the tank, Devontae Adams has got more in the tank. And you've got Puka and Devontae playing at a high level. Devontae Adams has got 9 touchdowns. And Puka Nacua, if he didn't get hurt, would be right up there with JSN. Certainly in receiving yards, he might end up winning the receptions battle with the way that he's just performing at an absurd level. And then Matthew Stafford, it's only the last couple of weeks that he's been talked about as an MVP candidate. And it's surprising it hasn't happened sooner. 25 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And Stafford is known as a gunslinger who's willing to throw picks. And he's not throwing them. 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions is absolutely remarkable. We talk, and rightly so. Sam Darnold's only taken 10 sacks this season. Matthew Stafford's only taken 14. So this is really a extremely well-matched game. I'm looking forward to it. There's trepidation because it's the Rams, but also excitement because this could be the time. This could be the time that Seattle beats the Rams and asserts itself as the team to beat in the NFC, or at least the NFC West. But I think that they can do it. But there is one little bit of hesitation I have. I need to see Ernest Jones on the field. And this is not to slight Tyree Snipes.
Well?
And yeah, I know you all saw that tweet from Ernest. So I'm pretty sure that that's a good sign that he's going to play.
As far as cryptic tweets go, yeah. Ernest, about a couple hours ago, as I was doing some final prep for this show, and it's been pretty prevalent to come. Yeah, tweets out nothing more than just a GIF. And it's like most people would have gone with the Undertaker gift, coming out of, but it was a guy being it was CPR, right? He was being like brought back.
Yeah, that rap video. Yep,
that'd be a strong indication. I get the feeling Ernest Jones had a positive meeting with the trainers today.
Yeah, so I think if Ernest plays, that's a game changer because this is nothing against Tyree Snipes, whom incidentally, I'm glad that his heart situation is seemingly resolved, as he said, and that his knee is better. So he looked those first couple of weeks, I think, justified him getting benched. His performance last week looked a lot like some of the good that we saw from him last year. But nothing against either him or Drake Thomas, who's also been a revelation in terms of how he's performed.
Yeah.
Those two could easily get picked on a lot by McVay. Because what do McVay and Shanahan do better than pretty much everyone? If they see a weakness at the second level with the linebackers, they're going to pick on them relentlessly. And the Rams run heavy tight end sets. I mean, they've got Davis Allen, Tyler Higbee, our old friend Colby Parkinson.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a real test also of the play action defense of Seattle because they were awful at it last year. They're much better at it this year. But there's still some issues where Knight and Thomas have been picked on in pass coverage and in ways that I don't think Ernest Jones would get fooled. So We know we're not going to get Julian Love or Jaron Reed back anytime soon, but having Ernest Jones back is kind of like getting that unofficial quarterback of the defense back. And that would give me more confidence that they can pull off this victory, because really, I think that the offense can actually do well against this Rams defense, as great as they are, and especially as fearsome as they are on the defensive line. But I think I would favor Seattle's receiving game over the Rams secondary. It's what happens with the Rams high-powered offense against the Seattle defense that I'm a little bit more concerned, because Stafford's been doing such a great job getting the ball out. He's been throwing his usual dimes, and also this is the best set of receivers Seattle has faced probably all season, because Godwin wasn't 100% in the Bucs game, and they got torn to shreds by Ibuka. So like, this is a huge matchup, I think, for Seattle's defense, even more so than their offense.
And there's Ernest Jones coming back, and then there's Ernest Jones coming back at 100%. And I feel like this game, more than any other, we need that. And Bryce, I'm going to throw this one to you again, because the way that they have beaten us consistently over and over again, they beat everybody this way. There's a bunch of clips that were being sent out over Twitter again today from their game against San Francisco on Sunday. Like, nobody throws the deep dig route better than Matthew Stafford. And nobody runs that route maybe better than Puka Nacua. And Devontae Adams is probably top 5 right there with him. They just kill teams, and they've killed us that way, and we just haven't been able to defend it. If Ernest Jones is 100% or close to it, and the way Ty Okada is playing, and Nick Emenwari roaming the middle of the field, we've seen some of his coverage reps. My goodness, I cannot forget still that deflection that he had against the Texans on Monday Night Football. Do you think in that very specific aspect of what the Rams do so well and have beaten us with over the years, that we're in better shape to defend against that part of their offense?
That's a really interesting question, because I think the one thing, especially with the way the Rams are playing offense right now, with these heavy 13 personnel offensive usages, it really kind of plays almost against what Mike's done so well with this defense in a way, because you've got some undersized linebackers in Jones and Drake Thomas and even Tyrese Knight, for example. You've got the Swiss Army knife of Nick Emenwari. It's really going to test how many DBs you keep on the field. And to your point on that deep dig route, how good your linebackers are getting to their drops, because they're going to have a lot of stuff running underneath them with these tight ends, with over under routes, zip routes coming out off of play action and such. It's really going to test this. And so, like, for me, like, no one throws that dig better than Stafford. There's 3 guys in this game, I think, that run the dig route better than anybody, and that's obviously Puka, Devontae Adams, and JSN is the other one you throw in that conversation. It's going to be really interesting to see how Mike tries to mitigate those particular concepts without giving up the dink and dunk stuff underneath that will chew up yards. Because I'll say this is the one concern I have for Seattle's defense in this game, is McVay will dink and dunk you to death underneath with those boots and those flats. And we've seen it for years. And the one thing Seattle concerns me with is their tackling and stopping those for 5-yard gains or 3-yard gains, rather than letting those turn into 12-yard gains, because the tight end slips a tackle and gets up the sideline. And we saw a little bit of that even in the Cardinals game. And we've seen it throughout this year, is tackling has been an issue for the Seattle defense. Like, it's a good defense. It's on the cusp of becoming very much one of the top 3 defenses in the NFL, but the tackling aspect is something that really struggles. Like, I kind of want to get Brandon's thoughts on this too, but like, for me, I think you almost have to go to kind of a 4-4 defense hybrid look this week to handle this 13 personnel look from the Rams when they go to it, and use Nick Emenwari as that 4th linebacker and get Tyrese Knight on the field and Drake Thomas and Ernest Jones if he's healthy, and sacrifice maybe a Ty Okada in the back end or a Kobe Bryant, because you're going to have to deal with it. Because if you come out what your base defense is, I think the Rams are going to have a field day doing a lot of things against that defense.
Brandon, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I do think that I'm a little more confident in where we're at with the 13 personnel that the Rams run. As much because Nick Emenwari can come out there and give you both a guy that can be an impactful guy and a run defender, and also be able to run with these tight ends and cover them up. So you can't really, what you're doing a lot of times, the 12, 13 personnel, is you're getting the defenses into base. Defenses in base right now with linebackers, especially the extra linebackers on the field, they've been all nickel centric for years now. So what they're doing, the Rams are taking advantage of teams that don't really have good base defenses that they can operate off of. I think we have pretty decent base defense. Drake Thomas can cover as well from the will linebacker position on these the tight ends, how they block them. I mean, Colby Parkinson coming downhill on Drake, he's going to swallow him up a little bit from a size standpoint. So there's some worries there. So I guess my real concerns come out of this in two different places. How you stop the run and how you deal with the play action game more than the 13 personnel. I'm not as much worried about that. Bryce, your point, and the one thing that we've seen, I think, is the biggest vulnerability in this defense. Tackling is certainly a part, Bryce. You touched on another part of it, though. The rollout from under center to the left with the tight end dragging across the field, left wide ass open, catches the ball, then runs it 25 yards up the field before there's a defender near him. How many Dalton Schultz? How many catches did Dalton Schultz have in that Texas game that were exactly that play played over and over again? I'm worried about that from 13 personnel, especially because the Rams are the number one team in their usage of play action. I think Sean's going to look at that on tape. He's going to know we already run that, and he's going to spam that constantly in this game. I think that it's really, for me, though, stopping the run first and foremost. And my reasoning on this is I've always believed with Stafford, somebody else mentioned, I forget who it earlier on the show today, that is known for being a guy that will throw you the ball. Watching the tape last week against the Niners, there's a couple of times during that game where Niners got their hands on the ball. They don't make the picks. I come back to time and time again, here's how you beat Stafford. He's a great quarterback. He's not an easy day at the office. Here's how you beat the Rams team. It's not going to be easy. You got to take away the run first because they are going to stay committed to the run, even if they're just marginally successful at it. You remove the run, you turn him one-dimensional to me. You get him a little more pass happy, 35 to 40 attempts over the course of the game. Stafford will always then give you a couple. He'll make the dimes. He'll put the great throws in there. He'll make some unbelievable throws, but he will give you those three opportunities. Let's go back to the home game last year against the Rams. We got Woolen makes the interception on Puka down on the 9 route. Ernest Jones has an interception in his hands in the middle of the field. Tough play, can't reel it in. Then we got Woolen at the end of the game. Standing flat-footed, Demarcus Robinson flashes right in front of his face. 3 opportunities in that game for a turnover for your Hawks there. You only made one of them. So watch this game. You get your hands on a couple of balls, you don't make those turnovers, you lose this game. You get your hands on those balls, you make those picks, really good chance you're able to go win this game because everything else will be so bloody close, I think, when it all comes down to it, because these teams are so evenly matched up. I get the worry on the 13 personnel. I like your creativity with the 4x4. I think you do stay with the 2 safeties. You're going to worry a little bit about the deep stuff still out of the base stuff, but I think your guys are going to be pretty well suited. I worry more about what they do in the run game than I do with them in pass protection or in coverage. I think with Drake and Emanwari, they can stay with these tight ends, but I worry a little bit about that. Can you stop the run? And then once you stop the run, can you take advantage of those opportunities when they come up? Because Stafford's not going to give you a lot of them, but he will give you, because he is a gunslinger and he's a guy that feels like he can fit it into tight holes. That's why he gives you these opportunities, is because he can oftentimes fit it into those tight holes. But you got to take advantage when you get the opportunity.
Brandon, I want to stick with you for a second. Talk about the outside coverage now, because I thought one of the things that was really interesting going back and watching the Cardinals tape again is not only, I think a lot of us talked about this during the game and in the 48 hours since, Reek Woolen's best performance of the year. I thought he was outstanding, especially going up against Marvin Harrison. He pressed him a lot. They played a lot of man coverage with Reek matched up against Marvin Harrison, where McDonald mostly prefers to play zone. Do you think, and we'll find out if Josh Jobe is ready to go Sunday or not, but the way the game Reek's coming off of, I'm not so sure that he's not going to start that game. Do you sense that maybe we'll see a little bit more of that might be some of the plan for McDonald, is to play a little more man this Sunday than he typically does?
I hope so, because this was a big thing that I wanted to see them do this offseason. The DNA of this defense, going back to Buddy Ryan, has its corners playing man on the outside and man press at that. So it's within the staple of this defense inherently. As your point, though, was Mike McDonald just doesn't do it a lot. But in Witherspoon and Woolen, you have 2 guys that can do it, and I think do it at a pretty high level. So utilize what they do best. Don't have them in off coverage, dropping to zone depth. That's what the Niners did last week. That's partly why those dig routes were open constantly. That's partly why Sean McVay solved Coach Carroll. That's partly why Stafford has destroyed us at times on these same routes, because you leave the door open. You don't close the door, you leave it wide open for him to go and take. So don't leave the door open. Give him a tough read off the snap. Make him look at press coverage and wonder about the disruption of the routes. And then I'm going to hit my back foot, and that guy might not be to his landmark. You let him get to his landmark, you're sitting off coverage, they're going to kill you all day on that type of stuff. Be aggressive, go down swinging. And you got the dogs on the outside in Witherspoon and Woolen now to be able to do it. It's not asking off-zone coverage corners to play press. It's asking 2 guys who excel at playing press. He did it in Illinois to Devin Witherspoon on the outside. And I would argue that with Woolen, he is at his best when you let him just press and run. Don't put him in off coverage. Let him press and run man off of it as well.
Yeah, McDonald keeps talking about how it's the process with Reek, and the technique just looked so much better on Sunday. Really, really promising. Mookie, let's zoom out again and go kind of big picture. Let's do this. I want to put this up on the screen here and share it. So this is Rob Staten on Seattle Sports Today, our good friend Rob Staten, and this is what he says about the game Sunday. And this is a pretty general statement or sentiment, I think, among the fan base and probably most of us. If the Seahawks can win versus the Rams in LA on Sunday, they will declare that they mean business and can be in the Super Bowl this year. Like this is a lot of the narrative this week. Like this is their chance to make a statement, to turn the tide, to announce themselves. I would argue that, and this isn't just me protecting myself emotionally, it's okay if they lose this game. I wrote about this yesterday. Like they get another opportunity to play them, right? I think these teams are going to be neck and neck to the end of the year. It's not the end of the world on Sunday if they don't win because, well, despite the fact that I think most people will view it that way. The sky will be falling if we don't win this game on Sunday. Mookie, where do you land on this?
I think if they even split with the Rams, that's enough for me to go, yeah, this team has got the potential to represent the NFC in Santa Clara come February, whatever day the Super Bowl is this season. But when you think about the context of the timing of these two Rams games, so this week you're coming off a win so easy against Arizona. You got to play Drew Lock again late in the fourth quarter. You got to pull your starters early. So you got a little bit of extra rest in terms of snaps played. That second Rams game is a short week Thursday night game off the back of playing Indianapolis. So that is potentially a grueling 2-game stretch in 5 days. And you're out of home games after that for the regular season after week 16. So to me, the fact that this game is on the road means almost nothing to me because, well, there are going to be a lot of Seahawks fans in that building.
10 in a row on the road.
I guarantee you, yeah, 10 in a row on the road. They seem to be less sloppy on the road than they are at home. I'm thinking maybe like 25% minimum of the fans there are going to be Seahawks fans. So I'm not worried about the crowd impacting anything. And incidentally, what I like about the Seahawks team, the silly procedural penalties that seem to just destroy drives every single week hasn't been happening nearly as much this year as it was last year, even the last couple of years. But yeah, to me, if they lose this game, there's still a chance to get it back. And it's a good thing that they swept Arizona already. So they would be 2-2 in the division. But don't forget that Rams loss to the Niners actually matters a bit to Seattle in the sense that they also have a division loss. So they're not far away in terms of tiebreaker if they meet again and Seattle is able to win the rematch against the Rams. And let's say they don't win this game. You got Tennessee the week after. And I know it's any given Sunday, blah, blah, blah. My jaw would hit the floor if Tennessee was even the slightest bit competitive against the Seahawks because they not only do they look dreadful, they're actively getting worse, and they're seemingly shedding all of the former Seahawks on their team, or at least the former Seahawks like Quandre and Tyler have gotten their requests to ask out from this.
Draymond too.
Ship. Yeah, and Draymond Jones got traded. So Cody Barton might as well just ask out too while we're at it. But they got through the next 4 on the road. Well, just this next 4-game stretch. The Rams is the tough game. But you've got Tennessee after that, and that should be a gimme. I don't care that it's a 10 a.m. game, whatever. That should be a gimme. Minnesota is not nearly as daunting as it looked at the start of the season. I think their defense is getting better now that they've got some guys back, but it's not, to me, as strong as it was last year. And obviously, not everybody can run the Kevin O'Connell offense seamlessly because J.J. McCarthy has kind of been good for like a couple of quarters maximum out of all the quarters he's played, and he's hardly played. It's his first full season. He's still wildly inexperienced. So I'm not going to make any declarations of him being a bust or whatever. It's going to be a tough game for him to go into Seattle and try and win a pretty big game for them because their backs are against the wall in terms of making the playoffs, given that they're 4-5. And then the other game is Atlanta. And Atlanta, to me, is one of the biggest disappointments of the season because they finally have a defense with a pass rush worth respecting.
Yeah.
And their offense is bottom 5 in points scored.
Yeah.
They are not scoring consistently. And to top it all off, their pick right now belongs to the Rams because they traded back into the draft to get James Pierce. So the Rams currently have the number 10 overall pick in next year's draft.
Should we tank that game?
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah, the Rams play the Falcons, so I think there's every incentive for the Rams to go tank that game instead. Let's not do the tanking. But yes, I think that they would be considered solidified Super Bowl contenders if they win either one of the Rams games, and even, the Colts, we'll see, because if the Colts have a dip, then maybe Indianapolis isn't as impressive as we thought. But to me, to get there, you got to beat the top NFC team. They don't play really another top NFC team this regular season. They don't play Detroit. They don't play Philadelphia. Green Bay at this point, I do not consider a top NFC team. They got to actually earn their reputation instead of just be given it because they traded for Micah Parsons. So in lieu of that, if you can beat the Rams, I think there's every reason to believe that the Seahawks are in that upper echelon of the conference, and not just by record, but by actually proving it.
Bryce, I want to ask you one more strategic question, and then I want to get to all the comments and takes and questions that we have from our 1,100 viewers currently. Thanks for watching, you guys. Really appreciate that. Provided we get to see Torrey Horton this week, and when Mike McDonald spoke yesterday, he said day to day on that one. And this is what we were waiting for. It wasn't just, hey, let's get Rashid Shaheed instead of Torrey Horton. We want to see them all on the field together, and Cooper Kupp as well. And it certainly looked like he was healthy on Sunday. There's some concerns, obviously, leading up to the game. If all those guys are healthy this week, how do you expect Clint Kubiak to deploy them?
I think he's going to deploy it very much like what we saw with defensive units in their NASCAR packages. I think you'll see some certain sub packages where you'll see Kupp and Shaheed and JSN out on the field together. And then you'll see somewhere Kupp won't. I think Kupp will be your switch factor for Horton. I don't think it'll be Shaheed. I think, and you'll see some with Kupp, Horton, and JSN on the field, but look at them to manage Kupp snaps more than anybody's in that grouping. And it'll be hard because this is going to be a huge game for Cooper. Just the emotions going through it and everything, right? Going back into LA where he had such an amazing career there. But I think that's where you'll see, and it'll dictate by tendency, it'll dictate by where you are in the field and what matchups you're liking. If there's a matchup in a certain package that Seattle has that they like, that will kind of dictate what they want to do. So I don't think you'll see Seattle all of a sudden come out and go empty and be like, yeah, this is what we're going to do in certain situations, right? Like some people would love that idea. No. This isn't Matt Hasselbeck and Mike Holmgren and their occasional under center empty packages, everybody. Like that's not what you're going to see, but you'll see them try and basically, I think what you'll see Kubiak do, and this is something as an offensive coordinator you try to do, you try to create balance with your playmakers. And so what you try and do is you don't want to have an entire group of just speed guys out there. You want to have guys, because when you run your concepts, you have certain strategic things you're trying to do in that concept that certain guys do better than others. So, if you're trying to take the top off on this team, you're not going to have Cooper Kupp run all your 9 routes. Like that's just not what you're going to do. You may leak Cooper down the seam on a couple, but you're probably asking Horton or JSN or Shaheed to be that guy. So it'll be interesting to see strategically what they do if Horton is healthy. Again, I think, it's going to be between Kupp and Shaheed who you see gets, the snap management. And I think it'll depend with Kupp where he is healthy coming out of this game. 2 catches, 74 yards. He had the big one down the sideline, but unfortunately he didn't score, which I was hoping he was going to. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll say this for one perspective I have of this Rams Seahawks game this weekend. This eerily feels very much like 2012 in the aspect of how we viewed those 49er matchups. We went into Santa Clara the first time and lost 13-6, and it was a slugfest. It was ugly. It was not, it was close. And to like Brandon's point, it was very close. They matched up really well. It wasn't until that game later on in the year where they came into Seattle that you started to see Seattle be able to, take some dominance away from that 49ers team. And the thing that I'll say in this, and I guess we'll talk about it, but I think this game is going to come down to much more on the coaching experience side of things. The second game, I think, will be more on the adaptability. Which staff can adapt better second time around versus the other team.
Maybe this won't happen because it just seems too obvious, but I feel like they're going to dial up a deep shot to Shaheed early. It's going to be in the script just to show it, even if it's not there, just to kind of announce his presence with authority, as Eric Cartman would say. Shall we get to some comments and questions? Let's take care of some of you who have been in here with some super chats. Sean Collins, Brandon is busy today. Yeah, went right. He's moonlighting. He's working a double shift, right? I guess working a
triple shift today. I got the round table at 6. So.
Yeah. We used to say in the restaurant business, working a triple.
That's right.
Never sleep. Yeah. Feed me more Seahawks. We're live. So good. Psych, we went live twice. The show so nice that we had to go live twice. Don't know what happened there, but hey, we fixed it, and here we are. And then Feed Me More Seahawks comes back with a $10 donation. Thank you so much, Bryce. I've heard you say Pete Carroll needs a statue. He disagrees, says no, he doesn't. Pete is not the reason we were a winner. Paul Allen, if so, if anyone deserves a statue. What do you think of that idea?
I think they both do, personally. Like, you want to throw Paul Allen for saving the Seahawks and not letting them move to, I think it was Anaheim they were potentially going to move to, or LA or somewhere like that.
Had the trucks
but I'll
packed.
say this in the defense of that too, is Pete's the only one that's brought us a Super Bowl and back-to-back Super Bowl trips in that time with those players, with that group. Paul Allen was the owner for a very long time, and he had Mike Holmgren, and we did go to a Super Bowl. We had the 1 year of Super Bowl success, and then wild card divisional exits consistently through that. It wasn't until Pete showed up that we truly, and John Schneider, we truly had that culture get built of winning championships and being a championship caliber football team. So I think in this case, you could put a argument for both of them. But I think for me, it still rests with Pete. Your owner, yeah, he has some pull in it, but Pete was more of that force, I think, in bringing those championships to Seattle. Brandon, it looks like he feels differently.
Yeah, I feel quite differently on this one. First off, Paul Allen didn't just save you from going to LA. Paul Allen also put his own money in, where we look across the sport ownership wise, guys like in San Diego, they weren't willing to pull any of their money in to actually hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money into that stadium to keep them here, on top of saving them. The other thing he did on top of bringing the stadium and keeping the team here is he committed to building a winner. And that's how you got to Coach Carroll. You weren't to Coach Carroll because you happened to just land on the right coach at the right time. You did it because Paul Allen was committed at all times to trying to go get that championship. And I mean, if you're overlooking the fact that Mike Holmgren had a Super Bowl stolen from him, that you were the better team on that field that day, and don't take that into account, I think that's losing a little bit of the puzzle of this, because Holmgren got you to a Super Bowl and you should have won it too. That's a part that probably should be in consideration of this. It's Allen firing Mora after 1 year, having the balls to do so because he recognized the fact that here's the right coach to do this. And remember too, not just finding the right coach to do this, but being willing to give Coach Carroll essentially general manager-like oversight after it had just failed with Mike Holmgren. Having the wherewithal to understand Coach Carroll was that good of a coach, was that a guy with the kind of vision that he could bring to play in order to get that done, and being able to take that step when you know that Paul Allen did not want to take that step. So it's all of that. He established the winner. You weren't going to Super Bowls before Paul Allen bought this team. You weren't getting Coach Carroll's in here before Paul Allen bought this team. You were getting in Tom Flores. That's who you're getting in. You're getting in guys that had never won anything at their prior stop, or had won stuff, but had certainly never gotten to a Super Bowl like Chuck Knox before him. So I think that you overlook a little bit of that impact if we're just going to the Coach Carroll side of it and not seeing on the grander picture of what was really driving this success over this 25-year period for the most part.
And maybe a little statue, maybe a figurine for Todd Lywicki. He is the guy that went out, got you, Mike.
I'll give him a bobblehead.
Yeah, there you go. Bobblehead night for Todd Lywicki. All right, this is an interesting one, and one I've heard a lot of, and I have pushed back hard on it. I'm not so sure that my foundation on this argument is getting stronger. It might be getting weaker, but I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Asks about the possibility that if things continue to roll on offense, will Clint Kubiak now become a big-time head coaching candidate around the league and get a job next year? Be one and done, the way he words it. Giants need to stay the hell away from my OC. Go ruin someone else's career. Give Kafka a chance, but Kubiak needs to stay here for a few seasons. Ironically, Mike Kafka, the guy that the Seahawks tried to hire about 27 times in both offensive coordinator role and interviewed for head coach, or tried to anyway, and now Brian Daboll can't block that because he's no longer employed by them. I have maintained that this is not hyperbole on my part. I have never seen a coach, at least not with the Seahawks, with more of a lack of personality, more of a dry conversational style. There's a reason that whenever he has his media availabilities, they're about 7 minutes long. If you go back on YouTube on the Seahawks PR channel, you can see I'm not exaggerating, because nobody wants to ask him any questions because he just isn't worth really hearing the answers from. Incredibly smart guy, really nice guy. He just doesn't have any personality, let alone a dynamic one. I maintain that in this NFL, to impress an owner, to go get a guy, convince a guy to give you $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year, you have to have some of that. You don't need to be Sean McVay, but you need to at least be Mike McDonald, not the most personable guy or the most dynamic guy behind the podium either. So in that sense, and Bryce and I have talked a lot about this, and I think it was part of the job search discussion. It was like in bringing in not just Clint Kubiak, but all of his cronies and all of his staff and his support staff is like, hey, let's make a run at this for a few years. And if you kick enough ass that, teams are willing to overlook that and you get hired away, fine. And then maybe we'll be developing a guy behind you as well. But I'm not so sure. This team finishes top 2, top 3 in the league in offense and goes to a Super Bowl. Maybe I'm wrong, and you guys can just jump in wherever you want to on this, but how do you guys feel about the prospect of Kubiak being one and done?
That would be his third one and done as an OC. It's just that the previous 2 times his coach got fired.
Choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So this time would be a job upgrade, but he's going to get paid one way or another. Either he's going to become a head coach, which I don't think is too likely. He's never even been interviewed for a head coaching position, I'm pretty sure. So this would just be the flavor of the month classic. Whichever offense is the best in the league and has an offensive coordinator who also isn't the head coach. In other words, the play caller isn't the head coach, like with Andy Reid. Yeah, I know that they've got Matt Nagy there and all that, but Reid is the one who's really running the offense. In this case, McDonald is the head coach. Kubiak's the play caller. Whoever's the flavor of the month, you get to be a head coaching candidate. Just be wary of that because Bobby Slowick went from everybody's favorites after CJ Stroud's rookie year to fired the next year. Now, I'd like to think that Kubiak won't experience the same fate, but either he gets a head coaching gig or he gets a handsome raise by Seattle and making the highest paid coordinator in the league. Fun fact, anybody know who the highest paid OC in the league is right now?
Chip Kelly.
There you go. No, it's Chip Kelly. And I tell you what, if that might be Pete's downfall. I'm rooting for him to succeed. And yes, he should have a statue built for him outside of Lumen Field, as should Paul Allen, because they're both extremely influential figures. But his hirings are going to be his undoing. And Chip Kelly, turns out he was not remotely ready to come back to the NFL because that offense is junk. And it's not just Geno, it's a bunch of other things. He's a big part of the problem. But I think Kubiak is probably going to get a raise at this point. What you hope for is that if Seattle wins a Super Bowl, Kubiak can be on his merry way, because what more do you want to accomplish other than becoming a dynasty? Anything short of that, and the best case scenario to me is that this is like Ben Johnson, where Ben Johnson could have taken a job after they were so close in the NFC Championship game against San Francisco, and Dan Campbell seemingly convinced him to go one more year. And unfortunately, they did even worse than the following year. Better record, worse playoff result, and then eventually became a head coach. And to me, quietly should be in Coach of the Year consideration, because the Bears are 6-3 right now and coming up with these miracle wins every week. But I think that Kubiak should stay here. But there are going to be a lot of head coaching openings, I think, pretty soon. The Giants are already open. The Titans are open. I think that Green Bay could be a surprise opening if their season falls apart, because LaFleur's contract is not beyond 2026, and they didn't give him an extension this offseason. So I think, and McDaniel, I think, is also another one who's going to be fired. Because Miami's highly unlikely to save their season. So there are going to be a lot of openings. And I think Kubiak, at the very least, is going to be in the hat as far as a potential head coaching candidate. I just hope that he is so dry. I hope he is like Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller's Day Off levels of dry, that nobody wants to hire him and he gets to stay. Bueller. Exactly.
Bryce, hold your thought on that for a moment, because I have a little bit of a twist as a follow-up question to ask you. Brandon, what are your thoughts on that?
I do think that Mookie's right on this one. I think he's going to be considered a candidate. I think that when you look at the potential of a coach being plucked, you got to look at who's also available on the roster of coaches waiting to be plucked up out there. Greg McCarthy types, right? Mike McCarthy types, right? Not really any kind of guys out there that are like, oh, tried and true. You feel great about bringing this guy in, which means that it's going to draw the eyes, in my opinion, of the NFL to those guys that are untested. And when you look at what he's done the past 2 years with New Orleans, and what he did with that offense, the fact that offense has not replicated the same thing this year once it was healthier at the start of the year under Kellen Moore as your, offensive-minded head guy, I think that that's going to impress people. He did a good job with the Minnesota Vikings as an OC when he was there before the head coach got fired there. Then he's done a fantastic job here, and where he's taken Sam Darnold even another step forward in his first year, immediate returns. That's going to open up, I think, a lot of people's eyes and get them very impressed. And within that, you're going to, I think, then see him be a real target. Now, maybe the interview process is enough to dissuade those teams away where they're like, you just don't have the personality to do it. But I think that he's done such a good enough job that it's going to get some people out there looking. The good part about this is, though, I think that if a guy like a Mike McDaniels, for instance, gets released by the Dolphins and you're the Seahawks and you just lose Kubiak, what's going to be a better spot for a former head coach with a really brilliant mind, who's an offensive minded guy, than to go to this Seattle team with this talent, with where this team is at, to set you up to go get that next head coaching job down the line.
Yeah, I think that's the flip side of this. In a worst case scenario where he leaves, I have kind of two ways of looking at this. One is we don't ever know. They don't make public. We don't know what these assistant contracts look like. They may have language in their contract that if Clint Kubiak does get hired by another team, and the one thing that does make me pause is the openings we've seen already, and then some of the openings likely to come have highly drafted young quarterbacks. You may want to hire a guy that you think has the best chance to develop those guys, a Jackson Dart, a Cam Ward, but he likely won't be able to take everyone with him. The contracts, and there was a long process to bring this staff in. The contracts that John Benton and Rick Dennison and Justin Outen and those guys signed, it may not be as easy as Clint saying, okay, guys, let's bring the whole band with me as well. The Seahawks might be able to block some of that. But Bryce, the way I want to ask it to you is, if that should happen, the other side of that coin that I was going to mention is just that it would be, as Brandon, you touched on it, a desirable job. You'd be in a much different position than you were an off season ago, where you'd pretty much have your pick of the best guys that are out there. But Bryce, you and I have talked a lot about some of the guys behind Clint Kubiak. I think there's reason to think that Andrew Janocko is being groomed to maybe be the guy. He's been with Kubiak for a little bit, but there's another guy on the staff that you think that's a holdover that the ownership and the coaching staff is very, very high on, who could be the next guy should Kubiak leave.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly Jake Peetz. And some people may scoff at that idea. And the reason I say they may not want to go outside. Yes, McDaniel seems enticing. And to be honest, like, Mike McDaniel's a very great offensive mind. And the other one, to Mookie's point that he brought up, was Matt LaFleur. Those are the only two guys I could really think you would go outside and hire if they became available, if you weren't comfortable with Jake Peetz. And the reason I say that is Peetz understands this offense very well. And you kind of have seen it now with his second go around as pass game coordinator in this offense, and some of the explosion we're seeing with it is he's more familiar with this scheme than what Ryan Grubb presented to him last year in a lot of ways. And you're seeing a guy that I think if they were to move off and maybe Janocko's not ready, he's an easier in-house promotion that knows this team, knows these players, what they do well, and it might make it an easier transition. Now, he's not a sexy hire, and you'd have to obviously still do the interview process. But if there is a guy like a Matt LaFleur out there that, because Green Bay falls on their face and he ends up getting canned, or Mike McDaniel gets canned down in Miami, which I think we all still expect to happen, that's probably your three guys, especially McDaniel and Peetz, where you're looking and going, these guys understand the system, because you don't want to have to reinvent the whole offense again. You've got so many pieces that fit this style of ball that you want to play. You've got an O-line that's starting to understand the scheme and system. You don't want to now flop and go a completely different direction, because that's a thing in its own right that can cause continuity issues with an offensive line, that can cause it with receivers and style of play. And what you're doing well with Sam Darnold, he plays well within a West Coast offense that asks him to do these things. You all of a sudden go to a different style of offense that doesn't ask for these. We might see a regression in where Sam's at to an extent. And I don't mean like he's going to fall off the face of the earth statistically. I mean, he just may not be as comfortable as what he's been doing. So the one thing I'll say when you talk about, to Brandon's point, and I agree with him that, what he is doing this year is going to bring eyes to Clint Kubiak. It 100% will, because to Brandon's point also, there's not a lot of big names out there. No one's going to want to hire Mike McDaniel as a head coach again, potentially, because of the talent he's had in Miami and the dumpster fire it's turned into. You got Mike McCarthy, not a big hire because he couldn't get it really going in Dallas. They were good, but they never were great. And he had a lot of talent there again. I think Robert Saleh is going to be a name that's going to be thrown out there quite a bit this offseason. The one thing, though, when you look from going from coordinator to head coach, is you have to be the guy that is the alpha in some respects when it comes to your organization and how it is run with the football side of things. And what I mean by that is, you look when Sean McVay got hired. The first hire was bring in Wade Phillips, who was a previous head coach and had a skill set of what it took to be in a big market and deal with all that stuff. Same as with Leslie Frazier getting hired with Mike McDonald here. Bring in that guy. So if Clint Kubiak goes off, who are you hiring to be that overseer for the first little bit? Because yes, he's got, guys in his back pocket. And to your point, Dan, you've got guys that have signed up here. You brought a whole staff here.
Yeah.
There was
what about his dad, Bryce?
Does Gary want to come out of retirement and do that?
Well, even if he's just there as that literal father figure type, like you mentioned, Frazier's been.
I totally agree with you. Maybe Gary will come out of retirement for that and do that. That's the thing I always wonder with this is how does Clint show he can command a room? Because that's the big thing. Commanding a room as an offensive coordinator is different than commanding the room as a head coach. It just is.
You don't need to.
Yeah, and that's the thing that will be interesting to see when teams go to interview, because Clint Kubiak will get interviews unless his offense falls on its face in the second half, which I don't expect it to do. I also look at Darrell Bevel, and we all remember when Darrell Bevel was here and what he did with Russell Wilson and that whole thing. And Darrell had a lot of similar characteristics in his persona as Clint Kubiak did. He wasn't the most interesting interview guy. Like, it was kind of, his interview clips were maybe 5 minutes long most of the time when the Seahawks did them. Like, they weren't anything over the top. It could be a situation where it's very Darrell Bever like, where, he stays here for 3 years and then the opportunity presents itself. Because I think the one thing Clint may want, he may want some stability. They've bounced around a lot, and maybe that's one of the selling points Mike and Jay and John Schneider gave this group was, you have stability here for, say and to your point, we don't know the contract, but maybe it's a 3-year contract. Here is some stability for you. We're going to link you with a quarterback. Here's some stability for you and your families. You're staying here for 3 years, and then we'll reevaluate. You never know.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought his dad up, because he was patient. He didn't get his first head coaching gig until later in his career. And I do think there was an intentionality in how they went about that coaching search in this offseason. And I think the message was, look, Mike Macdonald doesn't want to churn through offensive coordinators every year. I think he wanted some assurances that there was a little bit of a longer range vision here when it comes to those guys. I want to reference Kevin Mullen. Kevin, thank you so much for your super chat. Really appreciate it. Not going to put it on the screen. Like, we're not church boys. We're not choir boys here, but we try to keep it a little bit clean. So I'm not going to actually show it on the screen, but I will paraphrase your question and kind of ask it to you guys this way. Because one of you mentioned, you guys know what I'm talking about. You see it. One of you mentioned how Matt Stafford has been really well protected by an offensive line that doesn't really have any superstars on it. And they've done a really, really nice job of keeping him upright, which is obviously something you want to do with a guy who had an epidural 2 months ago. Just how do you feel generally about the Seahawks being able to continue since the Tampa Bay game? They've been able to pressure everyone they've gone up against, no matter what they throw at them. Do you think they're going to be able to get pressure on Matt Stafford?
If they will, it'll probably be in the interior, because I don't know if the edges, meaning Mafe, Hall, and Chenna, are going to be able to consistently win against Jackson and Tavenstein. I think that their interior could be a little bit of a weaker spot if such a thing exists. Or to put it another way, the strength is still going to be Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams still trying to wreak havoc in the interior, because they've just been able to do that consistently. And also, I guess I might as well add DeMarcus Lawrence, who at this time tomorrow should have a Defensive Player of the Week award just for what he did against Arizona, the double touchdown game. But I think that's this Rams offensive line is just really difficult to deal with. And usually when they're healthy, the Rams offensive lines are normally among the best in the league, among the best well coached. So not impenetrable by any means, even with Stafford's little sack rate. But I think that Seattle's defensive line has done such a good job at generating pressure with 4 that I anticipate McDonald to blitz very infrequently. Like, this might be, even by Seattle standards, a very low blitz rate game, because Stafford got blitzed a ton by Robert Saleh on Sunday, and he shredded them. And it was out of necessity that Saleh had to do that, because Nick Bosa is gone, and that means goodbye pass rush. I think Bryce Huff's injured, and then who's their Georgia guy? Michael Williams. He tore his ACL. So they got no real edge rushing talent, and they don't have the interior guys who can really threaten. So he had to generate pressure by sending an extra guy, and Stafford just sliced him up. I'm more comfortable if they just keep rushing 4 and occasionally maybe do a sim pressure 4 or maybe rush one extra guy, but I don't expect to see like an overload or anything on a consistent basis from McDonald, because I think Stafford's too good and too savvy, and McVay is just too savvy a coach to get beat with the stuff that was able to beat Arizona and Washington. So I'm not saying that it's going to be conservative, but I am going to say that to beat this offensive line, I think you're going to have to and beat this offense, rather, mostly win with 4 guys. And I think they're capable of doing it. So I'm really interested to see how that goes out, because that's going to be such an exciting battle of the trenches.
Yeah. We're going to be pushing 2 hours here in a little bit. I want to save a little time so we can kind of go around the panel and get some predictions and some thoughts going into this game. But I want to get through our super chats that we have. OE or OL. Seahawks have to make every offensive possession count. Try to avoid unforced errors because Stafford would almost certainly capitalize.
Yep.
This feels like a game. Brandon, how important is it that they start well?
I think it's important, but I think it's going to be probably a pretty close battle throughout this that has a tendency to go back and forth a bit. So it's the team start out well. Our script has been great, but I don't think that it's going to intrinsically be the driver of this game in one of the major parts. I do want to just add on Mookie's thoughts too. I don't think that blitzing heavily is the way to do it. Teams have been blitzing heavily on Stafford this year, and it's not been to the benefit of teams. That's part of why he's having such a good year. It's also one thing that Bryce will tell you about: 12 to 13 personnel can quickly become max protect off the back of a heavy blitz. And now you send all these guys and they just get picked up. And now you're like, wait, we don't have the free rusher. And now you got all that backspace on the end there for Puka and Devontae to maybe have a one-on-one matchup. You're not going to want to do that. So it's nice if you can get the fast start, but I think you're just trying to, you want to stay with this. Is going to be probably a pretty close game throughout, I would say.
To that point, Randy says, wouldn't shock me to see McVay buck 13 personnel, which they run at the highest rate in the league, I think, still, and spread us out. He can overthink things. I'd put Reek on Adams and Spoon head up on Puka, and Nick Emenwari being the chess piece. Coaching question, Bryce. Again, do you think there's things that Mike McDonald has kept in his pocket specifically for this game, or is this league just too tough and it doesn't allow you to do that?
I don't know if Mike's kept things in his pocket, but what I think Mike's probably done is he has certain variations of things that they are doing that he's got ideally set aside for, hey, we do this, but we're going to do it this way versus a team like the Rams that likes to do certain things. Like, he may have a certain spot drop that he hasn't called yet this year out of a certain, or has called, but he's going to change who that defender is that's dropping to do exactly what Brandon said. Hey, we know they're going to spam this certain type of pass play on us because it's been there. We're going to, instead of dropping our linebacker, we may buzz down our safety right into that window and do things like that. You don't really keep things out. You just tweak how things are done in game in your matchups based on what the other team does tendency-wise.
Randy says, what about when we have the ball? I think the run game is hitting stride. We've addressed that a little bit. Seems best running inside the tackles. Love JSN out of the backfield. Also jet sweeps. I thought it was cool, and I'm not going to take any credit for that. This happens all the time. You know, we watch a game. I do this in baseball games a lot. Sometimes a guy will step into the box, and you think, I just feel like he's going to hit a home run here. I was thinking, it'd be cool to see Rashid Shaheed dot the I and like get a carry out of the backfield. They did that once. And we had a comfortable lead at the point. That kind of felt like one of those things where, hey, let's get this on tape, right? Let's show this to the Rams so they have to prepare for this. We've got a general NFL-wide quarterback question here from Feed Me More Seahawks. Can we all agree that Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts are overrated?
I don't think Jordan Love has an ability to get to a second read.
I guess it depends on what your definition is of.
He is a one-read quarterback at this stage in his game, and I think that it speaks with Love that Hurts I've got my own issues with, but Love in particular gets this like he's going to tear the league up. Insider people feel like this guy's just on the edge of breaking through. He does not get past his first read. If LaFleur does not have it scripted up for him, he is lost in the sauce.
I think that Hurts is very offensive coordinator dependent, which is to say that at his best, which is the year that they lost the Super Bowl, actually, with Kellen Moore as the OC, I believe, or was it Steichen? It was one of those two.
Steichen.
It was Steichen. So the year that they lost the Super Bowl, Hurts was, I believe, the MVP runner-up to Mahomes. I mean, he had a genuinely outstanding year, but then you put him with Brian Johnson, and then suddenly things go off the radar, off the rails rather. Last year, he had his ups and downs, but he's finished strongly, deservedly. He balled out in the playoffs. I mean, it's just
sorry.
Yeah, there we go. All right. There we
I
go.
blame,
2020.
I blame the program.
Yes. 2025, it's a painful watch. And frankly, Hurts it just doesn't throw to the middle of the field, and it's annoying. There's so many opportunities he leaves on the table. With Jordan Love, though, the MVP talk that he was getting at the start of the season, I thought was really weird. I think that's Love. He can be entertaining to watch because he is not afraid to sling it down the field, but sometimes that becomes a little bit too Rex Grossman-esque. And I think he has some bad habits that he's never really eradicated. And the other part of this, Green Bay better start getting some real receivers. Like they got too many guys who are not wide receiver ones. I don't even know why they drafted Savion Williams if he's never going to run a route beyond the line of scrimmage.
Rookie, they've been doing it for 30 years, though. That's their mode for like 30 years. I mean, and they're probably they turn to you and say, "Look, we drafted Golden and Watkins in the first round." It's like, yeah, stop drafting the weird guys in the first round, though. Draft a true, like trade up for Ted Aroa McMillan. Don't take Golden. Trade up, go up and get the guy that's legitimate, the grade A talent out there at the wide receiver position. To your point, Mookie, because I agree with you 100%. But they just won't do it. It's like they've got that foundational. We've been doing it for 50 years one way and it can't be moved, you know?
Yeah. Hurts has at times been like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I don't think there's ever been a point where Jordan Love has played like a top 5 guy.
Yeah. All right, guys, we got to wrap this up. Some of you have other shows to go do. Let's do this. Let's go around. Bryce, we'll start with you and work around that way. You can predict a score if you want to, but just a general thought of what you think the key to the game is going to be on Sunday for the Seahawks to come out with a win.
The key, okay, so I'll give you a score. I think it's going to be 24-20, and I think it's going to be 24-20 Rams. I think the Rams are going to win this game. I know that may be against most popular people's decisions, but it's just I get this 2012 feeling for some eerie reason that we won't exercise the demon until we're at home. The thing for me, the key in this game, I think Seattle has to stay ahead of the chains. And what I mean by that is first and second down cannot net negative or 0 yards because you're going to allow this Rams team to put you in situations that I don't know with Olu being in there. Not that I don't think Olu's good, and I think Olu is going to have some, good play. It's his first start of the season versus a Brandon Fisk versus Braden Fisk versus Jared Verse in this defensive line. And they did some really good stuff against the 49ers last week with their stunts. Getting into third and longs is going to cause Seattle problems in this game. And that's my biggest thing is going to be that and the trenches. Seattle has to win in the trenches on both sides.
Mookie.
I'm leaning towards, unfortunately, 27-24 Rams. I think it's going to be a great game. It'll come down to the wire, and the Rams will just be able to nick it at the end. But I'll give you a prediction 4 weeks in advance. I think they take the rematch in Seattle with the new uniforms and everything, the quasi-Oregon Duck unis, proof that Oregon could win a big game late in the season. But I think the key for me as far as this game is what happens on play action. Because like I said, the Seahawks are a much, much, much better team defending play action than they were last year. They're among the best in EPA per play. But as was also mentioned by, I can't remember who, Matthew Stafford leads the league in play action passing rate. And the Rams are great at play action. But you know who's also really great at play action? The Seahawks. They are first in EPA per play, and it's not even close. They're averaging over 11 yards, I believe, per completion. Might even be 13. I would have to pull up NFL Pro for that. But their play action game is so important to their offense that I don't think they function really properly if the play action game gets snuffed out. Rams are okay at defending play action, but not great. So if Seattle can defend the play action, and that means also taking care of the tight ends underneath, I think it's going to be a big game for the linebackers and Nicky Manwari as well, as far as taking care of that second level and underneath stuff, then I believe that's going to be vital. So I'm going to go with the Rams to win this just by a smidge because I think that the O-line might have some trouble with Verse and Fisk and Puna and Kobe and all those guys. But it's gonna be a knockdown, drag 'em out fight where you might be discouraged because it's a loss, but encouraged because hey, you hung tough with one of the best in the league.
And Brandon.
Yeah, I'm going to be one of the first guys to take the Hawks in this one. I got us 27-24. I think it could go either way. My keys on this come down to two things, and it's kind of old school, and it's kind of boring, and it's kind of a blaze, but I think it's more of going to hold the line on this particular game. The team that runs the ball better and the team that wins the turnover round. Those are the two things in this game. If you have one team win one and one team win one other, flip a coin. If you have one team win both of those two things or the other team win, I think that's the team that wins this game. Get a couple turnovers, run the ball well. You win this one. I've got the Hawks winning it. I just think they keep getting better and better and better. I don't think the Rams have had to face a kind of matchup like this. I do think as well, we're a really good chance we end up seeing these two teams in the conference championship matching up a third time this year.
I'm with you. So we're going to make it split right down the middle. I don't know what the score is going to be. I do tend to think it's going to be more in the moderate range. I don't think either team's going to score over 30 in this one. I think it comes down to the pass rush on both sides of the ball. I was absolutely shocked, but also as a Seahawks fan about to face this team, really encouraged by how the LA Rams did not impact or affect Mac Jones in any way in that game on Sunday. 0 sacks, 1 quarterback hit. They just did not get pressure against an offensive line that by just about every metric across the league is middle of the pack, not one of the best offensive lines in the league. I think that bodes really well for being able to protect Sam Darnold, a guy who I think there's a lot of different players on either side that are looking at this as kind of a revenge game. I think there's going to be a lot of attention paid to Cooper Kupp, and for good reason. But Sam Darnold, one of the biggest knocks on him in the offseason and the critics that didn't like the move of pivoting off of Geno Smith and going to Sam Darnold was, well, look what he did in the last 2 games of the year last year against the Lions and the Rams in the playoffs. I think they got him 9 times. I think they sacked him as many times in that game as he's been sacked this entire year. I think this game means a lot to Sam Darnold. And I also think that this Rams offensive line is solid and steady as they are. They haven't faced a pressure unit like this, and Mike Macdonald's going to have a great plan. I think it comes down to who protects the quarterback better, who rushes the quarterback better. I've said all along, I think they split these 2 games in some way, shape, or form. And so, it just stands to reason that each team maybe takes the home game. I kind of like the Seahawks on Sunday. I feel like that locker room feels like there's something special growing. The Rams do too, but they've kind of been there for a little while. There's something powerful about a team that's beginning to believe in themselves, and that there's something special there. And I think that momentum is going to carry him into Sunday. And I think Mike Macdonald's going to have a plan. He's going to go out and kind of prove some of those people wrong that called him the defensive Sean McVay. Be sure, if you haven't already, depending on which stream you're watching, Seahawks Forever, hit subscribe. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Seahawks Eye on Bryce's channel. Always look to field goals to read on a daily basis everything that's going on with the Seahawks, and then the Hawks Nest down there with Brandon Kane. Also want to give a big shout out to Sleeper. If you haven't tried that app yet, they're a proud sponsor of both Brandon and myself. Check out that app, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
One more donation, there, buddy.
Almost snuck in, and then we're going to have to call this, guys. Sam, thank you for the super chat. Big coming in at the buzzer beater. Late to the awesome conversation. McBride showed twice he can be vulnerable to good tight end play, or we can be vulnerable to good tight end play with the Rams playing 3 tight ends currently. Is that our kryptonite? We touched on that a little bit, but if that's one thing, is that one of the things we're worried about Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a problem in our defense right now, and stylistically a little bit because of it, but it's also a little bit because they weren't attacking Devin Witherspoon. They weren't going as much as they were going at Emanuria, a tremendous amount in this past game. So we got to keep in mind a little bit of the target rate to the tight ends too in this last game, which is a driver of it. But yes, in general terms, Sam, it is a concern, and you expect the Rams are going to work it. They're not going to go away from it.
Am I crazy though to say I'd rather the tight ends get targeted more than Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams?
Yeah, absolutely.
Given the choice, right?
Maybe they've been very effective within their tight ends. So I mean, it's they've been taking teams apart with both ways of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam, for getting that in. Thanks, Brandon, for not allowing me to miss that one. And yeah,
appreciate it, Sam.
Through the end of the season now, we are going to be twice monthly. You'll see us here on the Seahawks Syndicate. So should we try to get this on cue, you guys? Oh, first of all, I have one last prediction.
Buddy, we got to wrap here. So
I got to get over. I know. We got one more. This is courtesy of JSN. This is what we're going to see on Sunday.
A lot of blur, going to go on.
We're going to see a lot of blur. All right, go Hawks on 3. 1, 2, 3. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Thanks for watching, everybody.